So we're going to talk about how to factor trinomials. At first, we're going to talk about factoring four-term polynomials. What I mean by four terms, it just has 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. And this method is called factor by grouping. First, we identify and factor out the GCF, greatest common factor, from all four terms, if there is one. Then we factor out the greatest common factor from the first pair of terms. We factor out the greatest common factor from the second pair of terms. And we'll discuss sometimes it is necessary to factor out the opposite of the GCF, meaning the negative version of it. If the two terms share a common binomial factor, factor out the binomial factor. So let's look at an example and see what this actually means. So what I do is I look through here and see if there's a number or a variable that can factor out of all four of these terms. Well, between 3, 6, 2, and 4, there's not a number. And the variables, notice this one doesn't have an a, so I can't factor out any greatest common factor. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the first two terms, 3a minus 6b. Is there a greatest common factor that can factor out of these? Yes. I can factor a 3 out of both of these numbers, leaving me with an a minus 2b. Then I'm going to come over and look at the second two terms. Is there a number or variable that can factor out of both of these? Yes, I can take a 2 out. I can also take an a out. Taking a 2a leaves me with an a minus 2b. Now notice I don't have a sign right here. What's going to happen is you're always going to factor out this sign. So sometimes we may have to make adjustments here, but always take the sign of the leading coefficient of the second set of terms. Now then, looking at these two terms here, notice what is in parentheses, the binomial inside these parentheses is the same. So I'm going to factor it out, a minus 2b, and I'm going to put my leftovers in another set of parentheses. So from the first term, I have a leftover 3. From my second term, I have a leftover positive 2a. And now this is completely factored. So, and it does not matter if I write a minus 2b times 3 plus 2a, or 3 plus 2a times an a minus 2b. Notice my parentheses are the exact same, they're just in reverse order. The order of our factors does not matter, because think about if I have 3 times 4 or 4 times 3. They both equal 12. So it doesn't matter which order you write these in. You'll just have to make sure that they're the same. Okay? Okay, let's look at another example. Let's look at this one. We have 6x squared minus 4x minus 15x plus 10. I'm going to first look and see if there is a greatest common factor that I can factor out of all four of them. Well, looking at my numbers, no, because this one's a 15, so I can't factor anything out of all four of them. Also, notice this one does not have an x, so I can't factor out an x. So now I'm going to look at my first two terms, 6x squared minus 4x. For my coefficients, I can factor out a 2. My variables, I can factor out an x, leaving me with a 3x minus 2. Now here's where we have a little bit of trouble. Remember I told you I have to take this sign right here. And then looking between these two terms, I can factor out a 5. But notice, it's actually a negative 5. So what happens is it changes this sign right here. Because whenever I distribute a negative 5 in here, I get negative 5 times 3x gives me that negative 15x. Negative 5 times a negative 2 gives me that positive 10. So I have to be a little bit careful with whenever I have to factor out that negative sign. It changes the sign of my term inside. So notice now the binomials are alike. So I'm going to factor out a 3x minus 2, leaving me with a 2x minus 5. And now then this set polynomial of 4 terms is completely factored out. Let's look at one more example. 18a to the third b minus 9a squared b squared minus 2a plus b. If you look at this with the coefficients, there's nothing I can take out except for a 1. For the variables, there's nothing I can take out because of this one only has an a, this one only has a b. So I'm going to look at my first two terms. 18a to the third b minus 2a squared b squared. For the coefficients, the 18 and the 9, I can factor out a 9. The a to the third and a squared, I can take out an a squared. The b and the b squared, I can take out a b, leaving me with 2a minus a b. And on all of these, it's very nice because you can multiply these back together to see if you get what you started with. Okay, notice my sign here. It's a negative, so I've got to take out a negative. Now, between 2a plus b, there's not a number that goes into both coefficients, and they don't have the same variable. So in this case, I always have to factor something out. So my greatest common factor here is actually a 1. So I factor out a 1 from both of those. Be careful because I took a negative out. So it's actually going to change my sign and my b. Now, looking at these, my two binomials are the same, leaving me with 2a minus b. And I put my leftovers, my 9a squared b minus 1, in my second set of parentheses. So now this is completely factored out. Again, be careful on some of these. You have to pay attention when you take that negative sign out. It changes this back sign. Then also, if there's nothing to take out, always take a 1. Okay? So practice factor by grouping, and then let me know if you have any questions.